welcome back to a timey-wimey pod where we watch and discuss every episode of Doctor Who from 2005 onwards. My name is Rebecca,
I'm Hailee.
and today we are talking about the Series 1, Episode 3, The Unquiet Dead, which premiered April 9th, 2005.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. If the audio's a little messy, we're still having some technical difficulties, so bear with us, but
Bear with
hopefully
us.
it's still all right. Would you like to hear some fun facts about this episode?
I would love to hear some fun facts on our third episode.
Yes. This was the first episode of New Who to be set in the past. It's the first episode to be written by Mark Gatiss. If you're a Doctor Who fan, you'll probably recognize the name. He's written a lot of episodes and has guest starred in at least two episodes.
Yeah,
And if you're,
there's two of them. Sorry, I
no,
totally
you're good.
interrupted you.
You're good.
Yeah, there's two I'm thinking of. He might have been there. I don't know. He's also
Hmm.
a part of the Sherlock world with Stephen Moffat,
Yes.
so there's
Lots of
that too.
connections.
Lots of them.
He was reportedly a fan of Dickens and was inspired by the Christmas Carol novella to write this episode. Russell T Davis, the showrunner during the time, wanted to show that the TARDIS often takes the Doctor to wrong places, so that's why they had that thing in the beginning where the Doctor was like, "Oh, we're not in 18." 80, we're in 1889, or no, it was 1860
1860.
to
Yeah.
18, yeah, yeah. So they want to show that, which that's a bit in Doctor Who. I love that they never really end up where they
Yeah, we see this
ending
throughout
up.
the entire show. Even actually, I can't say like even now, but it's been pretty consistent. But I do
Hmm.
like that multiple different showrunners have committed to the bit of the Doctor saying he's going somewhere specific and then he ends up somewhere totally different.
Me too. The character of Gwyneth in this episode is played by Eve Miles, and if you're a Torchwood fan, you'll recognize her because she plays Gwen in Torchwood. In early drafts of this episode, the Doctor shows Rose the future if they like didn't take care of the Gelf, and it would show modern day Earth basically like overrun, destroyed, invaded, and with the Gelf everywhere, and humanity was just like a bunch of walking zombies. But they cut that out, I believe, because of budget reasons. But really interesting.
Stop, that would have been so fun. I don't know if it's just me, but I love scenes like that and episodes like that where
Mhm.
it's an alternate reality. So I would have loved that, but yeah, budget makes sense. That would be a lot of budget and a lot of time.
Yeah. And I think the conversation they have where he explains that the future isn't set in stone, I think that really it got the same point across.
It did, and it was really important to have that pointed out because that notion is really the basis for a lot of Doctor Who stories.
Definitely. So now let's just jump into the episode. What did you think of the opening scene?
So the opening scene, oh my gosh, okay. The opening scene is a little crazy when you think about it
It is.
because me and you are both so used to the world of Doctor Who and we're used to like crazy weird things, but like for this to be the first episode set in the past, the first like episode like this in the revival, it's a little crazy, I'm not gonna lie, because we start this episode in a funeral home. I guess you would say a funeral home.
Hmm.
And there's a what appears to be a corpse in a coffin, and then the corpse in the coffin wakes up and starts strangling this guy who's
Her
like,
own grandson.
yeah, like her own grandson who's like paying respects to her, which is just wild. And then it just goes straight into the title. So you don't know what's going on. And it's really it really pulls you in.
Hmm. And then we see Mr. Sneed call for Gwyneth, and we get the sense that this is not he's seen this before. There's something weird going on at this funeral home.
Yeah, it is definitely very much a hide behind the couch moment, which if you
Mm.
are a fan of Doctor Who, you know there are many, and that is a statement that is said about the show, is the moments where you wanna hide behind the couch.
My favorite hide behind the couch moment is coming up in a couple episodes, and I can't wait to talk about it. And then we catch up with Rose and the Doctor in the TARDIS, and I love these first few scenes of them in the TARDIS, deciding on where to go. Rose is like almost helping him fly the TARDIS at first, which I thought was really interesting. We don't really see that a lot. And then I love there's like half a second, but they're like on the ground of the TARDIS laughing after they like finally landed, and I just love that moment. It was very fun.
Girl, what do you mean? There's a moment where they're lying on the ground?
Yes, it's very, very brief. I think this was the first time I noticed it, but they're like on the floor of the TARDIS laughing. It's very reminiscent of that scene in Tooth and Claw when Ten and Rose do the same thing.
I have to go back and watch that after we're done with this episode because
Yeah,
I live
it's
for snippets like
super
those.
quick, but it's great. I all the scenes of them in the TARDIS are so great of them talking about going to explore um 1860. I love when she is talking about how 1860 it happens once and then it's gone forever, and the Doctor just, you can see like the light in his eyes while he's listening to her talk, and he's like it's not a bad life, and she's like better with two. It's just it's such a good scene.
It's such a sweet moment, and I love that moment. I also love the moment where Rose, I almost said my dog's name, ignore me. Um, where Rose, like, is about to step out of the TARDIS, and then the Doctor's like, "Oh, wait, like, what are you gonna do dressed up like that, basically, out there?" And so she goes to the TARDIS wardrobe, she gets into this outfit, which can I just say, favorite outfit. I love this outfit.
Great
It is
outfit.
so good, true to the times, and I just love it so much. And then she comes out, and the Doctor's like, "Blimey, you look beautiful."
You're
And Rose is
beautiful.
like,
Oh,
I know.
it's so good.
It's so good, and then he totally catches himself, and then he just, like, adds, "Considering you're a human," which
Poor
Rose is like,
human.
"What does that even mean?" Like, be so for
I love
real.
that scene. I love that Nine makes her change in this moment, and then that never happens ever again.
And, like, the history of the show for each Doctor and companion, like, it never happens again, I feel.
No. In series 3, Martha Jones is walking around like during Shakespeare's time in like jeans and a leather jacket.
And literally no one says anything, or if they do, it's like
No.
a throwaway line.
Yeah, like sometimes we'll see characters like choose to change. Like Clara would sometimes try to like change to fit the setting, but this is the only time you really see the Doctor be like, "Go change."
Which I kinda wish we had more of, especially with Rose.
And I love some good period costumes, so I
I
think
do
they
too.
should do this more. Mhm.
Taking back to this episode, I love that moment in the TARDIS, and when they step out of the TARDIS, well, when Rose does, and she steps, like, in the snow, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, we really have traveled to the past." And I know she believed the Doctor and everything, but I think it's one of those things that you have to see for yourself to
Yeah.
fully believe it. And once she stepped outside, she was like, "Oh my gosh, this is insane." And then after that point, when Rose and the Doctor are both walking in the snow, the Doctor gets a newspaper and he's like, "I've got the time wrong." And Rose is like, "I really don't care." And then he's like, "I got the place wrong. We're not in Naples, Italy." And Rose is like, "I don't care." And then he says, "We're in Cardiff." And Rose is like, "Oh, really?" Like, we traveled in the past, so far in the past, and we're still very close to home. It's just a really funny moment.
It is really funny. Yeah, I love that scene. And then we get to go meet Charles Dickens. What do you think of this portrayal of Charles Dickens?
I think this is a really, really nice portrayal of Charles Dickens. I really enjoy the actor, and I do kind
Me
of have a
too.
fact.
Oh, let's hear it.
Simon Callow, who portrayed Charles Dickens, was considered for the part because he possessed extensive knowledge of the author and had experience playing the character before and recreating his public readings. But he contended that for him to agree to play Dickens, the script would have to be sufficiently high quality. And so at first when he heard that the author was to be featured in Doctor Who, his heart sank because he felt fiction had a tendency to kind of just, like, not really understand him, his life, or his books, but he Simon Callow stated that Mark Gatiss knew exactly what Dickens was about, and that's why he accepted the role after he read the script, and so that's my little fact for you.
That's really interesting. And I like that because we don't see Dickens do a whole lot in this episode, but we do see him go through a big emotional journey. Like in the beginning, when he's talking to that one man in the backstage of the theater, you can see he's not thriving. He's not live, laugh, loving.
No,
He's down in
he
the dump.
really isn't.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I really like that about Simon Callow. I think that's actually pretty cool that
me too.
he understood Charles Dickens and that there like, throughout the episode, there is that big, like, emotional journey he takes, and yeah, so we also have Gwyneth and Mr. Sneed. Mr. Sneed, of course, is, for lack of a better term, the funeral director, and Gwyneth is, like, his servant,
I
trying to
love
find
Gwyneth.
Oh, I love Gwyneth so much, and we're gonna talk so much more about her in a few minutes, but, they're trying to find the old corpse that had basically come alive. And so there's just
Yeah.
this dead lady, like this obviously dead corpse in the
Hmm.
audience watching Charles Dickens recite A Christmas Carol, which by the way, no one pays any attention to this corpse except Dickens. And then all of a sudden, all of this like this blue ghost kind of emits out of her. And we know that's the Gelf, which are aliens,
Hmm.
but it's just when you're watching it back, like watching it for the first time, you're like, what's going on? But watching it again, it's kind of funny to see everyone's reactions. And then Charles Dickens is just like, what the heck is going on here? And the Doctor and Rose are like, yes, because they heard people screaming. And they're like, that's where we're supposed to go.
Specifically, Nine says fantastic when he sees the ghost, which I think is just so hilarious.
It is. It's very much a nine thing to do. And so
Very Nine.
yeah, Rose and the Doctor end up splitting up. The Doctor goes with Dickens, and Rose goes because Mr. Sneed and Gwyneth found the lady and were trying to take her back because they didn't want to be
I love
humiliated, I
when
guess.
she says, "I'll get him, doctor." Like it's so
Yes,
I don't know, that line is so cute.
it's so cute. But that does lead to Rose being, kidnapped
I
and,
know, poor
and made
Rose.
unconscious.
Yeah. Did they chloroform her? Like what?
That's what I assume.
Yeah. I love when we see the doctor then take over Dickens' carriage and he doesn't realize it's Charles Dickens yet. And he's like, "That's my carriage." And the doctor says, "Well, get in then." Like, that's just such a great line.
I know, I love it so much, and then we have 9 literally fangirling over meeting Charles Dickens because he's like, "And what's your name?" Because he didn't realize until then, and then 9 is literally flipping out, so excited and
It's
giddy,
so funny.
and, saying all of these book titles to Charles Dickens and saying, "I'm your biggest fan," and Charles Dickens is like, "What's a fan?" And it's just,
I'm
the
sorry.
best scene.
The great scene. I don't like the fan joke. It's just
No?
it's too much. It's like, yeah, we get it. Like I don't know. It's just like too much for me.
Interesting. I don't mind it. I've always thought that's funny.
That's fair.
Interesting.
Um,
Agree to disagree. Look at us having our
yeah.
first disagreement.
Oh my gosh, our first fight.
It is not our first fight, trust me. We don't
Well,
fight
on the
anymore.
podcast, on the
Oh, on the
podcast.
podcast? This is
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But just to clarify, we don't fight in general, but
yeah. We're very peaceful these days.
we are. We got all our fighting done in our early days of friendship when we were like 11.
Yes, we've mentioned this in the first episode, but this year will mark 14 years of us being friends.
I yes, it will. So we've been friends for a hot minute.
Yeah. And then we go back to the funeral home and they kind of leave Rose and what would you call that room? Like the viewing room?
The coffin room,
The
the
coffin
dead
room? Let's
room.
the dead room. I don't
I
know.
don't know.
But they leave Rose in there. And once again, I love how brave she is in this scene. Like at first she sees the old woman's grandson who has now been taken over by the Gelf. And at first she asks like, "Oh, are you okay?" And then she realizes something's happening, but again, she's not screaming, she's not, you know, she's being very brave. She's not, she's trying to leave, but she's not backing down. She's
Yeah.
scared but brave at the same time. And then, oh, I love then when the doctor and Charles Dickens they get to the house and they kind of like rush past Gwyneth. She tries to keep them out, but they get in there, and then they reunite with Rose. And I love going forward a little bit. I love the scene where Gwyneth gets the doctor's tea, and she just knows exactly how he likes it. And that's kind of when we
Yeah.
start to realize like Gwen, there's something going on. She just knows things.
Yeah, it's interesting how she knows things.
I think Rose and Gwyneth are really at the heart of this episode. This isn't one of my favorites of this series, but I what really makes this is one like the dynamic between Rose and the Doctor. We have some great moments between them, but Rose and Gwyneth, like their friendship and their conversations, to me is really what makes this episode.
I agree. I would also argue the role Charles Dickens plays in this
Mm.
episode too makes it up for me personally, but Gwyneth and Rose are definitely like a huge part. Gwyneth mainly, like if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, I can definitely see like why they brought this actress back, and basically did like the modern version of this character in Torchwood.
Yeah, she references that she is related to the Gwyneth that we see in this episode, so that's a
She comes
fun
from an
little nod.
old Cardiff family. I know. I do like that
Yeah.
nod, and I like it's kind of mentioned in a later episode, which is fun.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree, and, they see, like, the Gelth, they notice, like, the Gelth are kind of traveling from all of the gas lamps to other gas lamps, and the doctor is like, "What's going on here?" And he discovers that this house is sitting on top of a rift, which is a weak point in time and space, a connection between that this world and another one, and it is most of the time the reason for ghost stories. That's what the doctor said, and spoiler for the end of series 2, this moment made me think of Army of Ghosts.
Oh yeah, this rift comes. We see this rift again, multiple
We
times.
do. We do multiple times, you're right.
I also love, not to skip ahead too much, but when the Gelf are talking about the reason that they're there, the reason that they are kind of without a body is because of the Time War.
Yeah, we do. We get that moment, which I've always wondered, is that true or is it not because of the end result of this episode?
That's very true.
Like,
They
was
could
that
have just
something they were
been,
just saying?
mm, they could have like known somehow about the Doctor's connection to the Time War, and were using that to manipulate him to get him to help them.
Yeah, that's what I've always thought in watching this episode. I
Mm.
mean, to be honest, this is like literally my second time watching this episode. I would skip this episode before rewatches. Um, so yeah. So I feel like they definitely played on the doctor because I guess we can skip ahead a little bit because the Gelth ultimately are not safe. They're not safe. They're not good people. Good people. Good aliens. Um, they trick the doctor and they prey on
Mhm.
him and yeah. Um, but before that scene, we have Rose with one of her girly chats.
One of her girly chats. I love this girly chat. I love how Rose is asking her about how she went to school and how much money she makes. Like, she really wants to know about Gwyneth's life. And they talk about the butcher boy, and Rose is like encouraging her to ask him out or offer him tea. It's very sweet.
And we have another moment here where we see there's a little something more to Gwyneth because we keep alluding about it, but like we don't really know until this moment that something real crazy is going on with her because she starts talking because Rose asked her about her parents and Gwyneth shares how her parents died when she was 12. Mr. Sneed took her in, and then she was like, "I believe that they're waiting in paradise for me, both of them, and I'm blessed. And I bet your father, Rose, is waiting in paradise too for you." And Rose
I
is like,
love that
"Hold up,
moment.
wait. Like, I did not say anything about my dad." And Gwyneth
Hmm.
goes on to say, "You've been thinking about him a lot more recently." And Rose is like, "How do you know that?" And then Gwyneth is like, she just talks about like how Rose came such a long way, basically alluding to the future. And then she says, "The big bad wolf," which is another
Hmm.
huge moment. And then Rose is like, "Well, what's happening?" Gwyneth is like, "I'm so sorry. I totally like overstepped." But then we learn how Gwyneth knows that.
I That's probably my favorite little bad wolf teaser during this series, and I love the mention of Rosa's dad. I think that's uh, a great way to tease the Father's Day episode, like mentioning that Rose has been while traveling with the doctor. She's been thinking about her dad.
I I mean, I can definitely see why she's talking about her dad, and of course, in one of the future episodes, we kind of get more into that story, so that will be
Hmm.
really interesting to talk about. But yeah, I like this mention of the big bad wolf. I also love. There's another future mention we'll get into later in this series that I love, probably equally or a little bit more, but I do love this mention a lot. And there's a lot of mentions of Bad Wolf in series one.
There is. I kind of forget sometimes, like, just how much they really tease it. Because the first time I watched the series, I really didn't notice all the Bad Wolf Easter eggs.
No, same here. And also, I don't know about you, but when I was watching the series for the first time, there it was like so much. Like I binge
Hmm.
watched it and there was just so much going on that even like the
Definitely.
mentions of the big bad wolf, like I completely missed. Not because they were not obvious in some cases, but because I just literally could not. Like there was so much, but in rewatches, that's what makes it really fun.
Definitely. And I would say that's true of all of Russell's seasons. There's a lot of things the first time I was watching I didn't notice that I then picked up on rewatches later on.
Yeah, same here.
Fast forwarding a little bit, when they are talking to the Gelf and they want to use basically the humans' undead bodies so they can have a physical form, and Rose is trying to stand up for them, for the deceased, and be like, that's wrong, like they can't take their bodies, like they're dead, but we should still respect them. And the doctor's like, why? Like, I love that kind of back and forth that they have.
Yeah, I do too. I was actually going to talk about that next too, where the Gelt is like we have no bodies, like they were destroyed in the Time War. Like we would
Hmm.
love to come and basically go into all the dead people, and they're basically like they're dead anyways. Like what good is it? And the doctor kind of, like, agrees and, like, starts thinking about it, and Rose is like, "Hold up, respect for the dead, please." And so there's just, like, that dynamic of Rose and the doctor, and I love that they're both not afraid to be passionate about what their opinions are to each other.
Definitely. I agree. And I really like the reveal, they told the doctor that they were just kind of a small swarm. There's only a few of them, and then it's revealed, oh, only a few billion Gelf.
Yeah, and then we quickly see that the Gelth aren't peaceful like they said. They were crazy and they wanted to overtake and overrule the world. And obviously, well, not obviously, but Rose doesn't really say, I don't think she says anything, but in her mind, she was like, I knew I had a reason. I bet you. I bet you.
They definitely had an "I told you so" moment later on, I
Oh,
bet.
for sure. For sure. The doctor probably did not hear the end of that from Rose.
Definitely. And then everything kind of goes where they kill Mr. Sneed. Rose and the doctor kind of trap themselves in the little dungeon.
They do. Yeah, it's the morgue. I always thought it was the attic until I realized, no, it's the morgue.
It's the
They say
morgue.
it's the morgue.
Yes.
Yes, we're going in the attic. That's where we're going. No, they said they were
Yes.
going to the morgue,
That'd be a
because
big.
the guy, yeah, that would be a really big attic. And the ghosts are going into more and more dead people, and, Charles Dickens, bless him, he just runs away. He's like, "Mm,
He
this
says,
is
"I
too
gotta
much,"
too
and
much."
he went.
For a man that has written ghost stories, you would expect maybe a little more.
I know.
But he to his credit, he does come around and kinda saves the day, low key. He and
He
Gwyneth are
does.
really the heroes of this episode.
And that's what is so interesting to me about 9 in this moment specifically is that, like, he basically gave up. Like, you see Rose being like, "Oh my gosh, I can't die here. Like, I'm alive in the future. How can that happen?" And the doctor's like, "Well, you can be alive then, but then die here. Like, you can still die, but then," and then he's like, "Oh my gosh, like, it's all my fault. I brought you here." And Rose is like, "It's not your fault. I came with you. Like, you didn't kidnap me, basically." Like, I like that
Mhm.
she clarified that with him and was like, "It's not your fault. Like, I came here willingly." And then we have him contemplating his actual death. Like, he just completely gives up, doesn't even, like, keep thinking about what they could possibly do. And it's just an interesting insight to, like, his, mindset right in that moment. And would the future Ninth Doctor later on in this season have dealt with it the same way?
Definitely. It's really interesting to see him almost accept, "I'm gonna die in a dungeon in Cardiff."
Yeah.
As much as I love Rose, and we know I love Rose, it always bugs me that she thinks she can't die in 1869 because, yeah, of course you can die. Like, I don't know. It just always bugs me for some reason that she thinks she can't.
Interesting. Here we are disagreeing yet again. I feel like it's like a normal thing where it's like one of those things that like seems obvious, but like she probably didn't stop to think about it, honestly.
Probably. It's probably one
But
of
I
those
see
things
what
that's
you're
like,
saying.
yeah, of course you can. Like, yeah, you haven't been born yet, but you have. Like, I don't know. Call me a
No,
hater.
I yeah, I can actually see where yeah, I can see where you're coming from and I actually am starting to come to your side.
Thank
Um
you. I
you're not
do
welcome.
really love this
I'm just
conversation.
kidding.
Wow, I see. I do really love
Kidding.
the conversation they have in this little dungeon. I love when he says um, he's so glad he met her. That is just such a cute line.
I know. That's so sweet.
Yeah. If you haven't already been able to tell, we are big Rose Doctor fans in this house.
Yes, we are. And we know there's people who disagree, but we don't care.
Yeah. Hey, respect it, but this is
Yeah,
who
we
we are.
respect it, but this is who we are. That's what I meant.
I am, in general, against companion and doctor relationships, but this is
Same.
one of them that I will love until I die. Sorry.
Same here. Same here. Future companions? Absolutely not. There's a specific one
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of. No, hate
Yup.
to her. Yeah, Rose is definitely the exception.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I also love in this episode that Rose advocates for Gwyneth because they have
I
like a scene
know.
where Gwyneth, because she is a part of the rift, so she's able to like communicate with a Gelth, and she kind of brings the Gelth to talk. And after that, she's like exhausted. And I love that Rose is like, hey, because the doctor starts talking and is like, hey, like you can become the bridge so the Gelth can come. Um, we're kind of going back a little bit. Of what we're talking about. But Rose is like, no, like she's exhausted. And I just love that she advocates for Gwyneth. But ultimately, Gwyneth does decide that she wanted to try to help bridge the gap. And that ended up killing her, unfortunately.
It did. I do love that as well. How Rose really sticks up for her, and later on when the doctor's trying to get Rose to leave the house and to go with Dickens, she doesn't want to leave Gwyneth, and it's just a really sweet moment and just shows how much she cares for the people around her, even just this girl that she's known for like what 30 minutes.
Yeah. And she's like, Doctor, like you have to stay with her until it's safe. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I will, but then he finds that she's dead and has been dead for like the past 5 minutes and it's too late. And then Gwyneth is the one who lights up the gas and explodes the house, which Charles Dickens was the one who realized that like turning off all the gas lamps and letting the gas go could get all of the Gelth into like the air and out of the dead people. So they both saved the world, but specifically Gwyneth. And I think it's really poignant how Rose says, like, Gwyneth saved the world, like a servant girl saved the world, and nobody will ever know.
I know. I love that line from her. It is really sad, and it's always gets me how when the doctor says that she died the moment she stepped under the arch, like it's really sad. And she's
Sorry.
also betrayed by the Gelf because she thought they were like angels. They were watching over her, and then
Yeah,
she realized they were just using her and they were lying.
which is heartbreaking when you think about it,
It
especially for
is.
her. Like, she lost both parents
I
when she was
know.
really young. And Rose is noticeably upset. And I honestly would be too.
I will admit I never quite understand how the Gelf works, especially with the gas. That always just kind of goes over my head a little bit. I'm not a STEM girly. I'll just admit it. But with most things in Doctor Who, I kind of just I go with the flow.
No, I am the exact same way. Exact same way. Yeah, I don't know exactly how the gas works with the Gelth and vice versa.
Yeah. I do love the scene though of Charles Dickens running back into the house and he's figuring it out and he's turning on or turning off the gas, whatever he was doing. That's a great scene as well.
No, for sure. And then at the end of this episode, we have him noticeably like happier and more cheerful because
I
he did
know.
start out this episode like all solemn, like you said, and he was cheerful, but and he was like, I'm gonna write about this. I'm gonna spend time with my family, and
Yeah.
that's really sweet. But then the doctor's like, he dies in the next year. And Rose is
I
like, that's
know.
so sad. And that doctor is like, "Yeah, it is sad, but let's go." Basically.
Let's move on. He's like, well, by your time, he's been long dead, and we brought him back to life, which is kind of a nice way to think about time traveling.
Yeah,
I
I
wanted
do
to
like
point
that.
Definitely. I wanted to point out the scene where the house is on fire. The CGI is so bad in that scene. And I noticed it when I was doing this rewatch. It's really funny how not great it looks.
That's funny. I can't necessarily agree because I wasn't paying full attention to the CGI of the house
It's
blowing up,
very
but
quick.
I
I
believe
don't
you.
expect you to. When you go back to look for that scene in them in the TARDIS, look at the house too, because it's kind of
I will.
funny.
I definitely will. And then we also get okay, knowing your thoughts on the other things, do you like or do you dislike this scene where Charles Dickens is like, you guys are going in like that small blue box
I
like
like it.
together?
It's something we see multiple times throughout the run of the show,
Yeah.
so it's kind of a nice reoccurring bit. Like, oh, you guys are going in that really tight little box together. Like, what are you doing? And then
Yeah.
it's really cool to see his reaction as the TARDIS dematerializes.
That is cool, and I really do enjoy that moment. I honestly love any moment in any episode. There's just like a random person or a random character reacting to the TARDIS
Me too.
dematerializing.
It's always great, and I love listening to the TARDIS sound. It's very comforting.
I love that sound. Can I just say, if I were to ever hear that sound like in public or at home randomly, and I
Oh,
am
I
not the
know.
person putting it on, I I would die, literally
Yeah.
die on the spot.
Me too. I'd be looking around, like, where's it coming from? I always kind of think about how past companions that are living on Earth probably are always listening for that sound in the wind or looking down streetways and alleys for a little blue box. And it always makes me kind of sad to think about that.
I know, same.
Any other notes you had about this episode?
No other notes, but I do have some reviews from 2005.
Let's hear it.
There are some interesting ones. So I'll start it off with this one, which is from pagefillers.com by Joe Ford on May 1st, 2005.
Ooh.
It is shocking just how out of place Christopher Eccleston's Doctor is in the Victorian era, considering how perfect his previous selves have fitted it. It's another layer to this intriguing new Doctor that marks him out as something very different to what we are used to. My friend Matt is having troubles with his accent, this very northern sounding doctor proving a bit too normal to be totally believable, but I'm finding his portrayal more and more interesting every week. Gone is the grinning loon from Rose as Eccleston grows into the role and discovers what the show is capable of, and he is replaced by a far more balanced character, one who is capable of growing very angry suddenly, who can turn on the charm, make quick decisions, and remain very humane. He dashes about Victorian Cardiff, every inch the hero, right up to the touching climax.
Interesting. I love the northern accent. Um, and I don't know how I feel about the comment that he's out of place. I think the doctor's always out of place in whatever time period he is, and that's kind of the point. But it didn't feel noticeable that, like, oh, he's definitely out of place compared to other doctors in the
I,
Victorian era.
yeah, I agree. Okay, so this next and final review is a bad one about this
Oh
episode.
no.
Um, yeah, it was made April 20th, 2005, and it is by Mike Morris on pagefillers.com. He said, there are two overwhelmingly negative elements to the story, one of which I'll discuss later on, but first for the production. It's ops. It's awful, absolutely awful. It's hideous, prettified, cod Victorian rubbish that sabotages Mark Gatisse's script. But he also says that the ending is disappointing and unimaginative, and kids are smart. Something we forget. Kids will know that this wasn't a good element, it wasn't something to learn from. And what makes Unquiet Dead a good story is that the really wonderful scenes in it, that the ones that kids would take with them, are kicking in the opposite direction, whatever that means.
Interesting. T- on the note of production, I know I pointed out a few production things that I didn't necessarily love, but to me, it's not distracting from the script or the characters. But I'm also not a person that really notices sets or production or CGI or whatever that much. I know I just pointed out the fire, but to me, I'm always more focused on dialogue and characters and story.
I'm the same way. I mean, it honestly really depends on the episode for me. If I pay attention to the CGI, I'll definitely like pay attention to the cinematography and the
Hmm.
editing always, because I I love video and I love video editing. Um but yeah, I don't always pay attention to that either, so I don't fully agree with that. Is it the best it could have been? No, but it was also 2005 and they were on a budget, so what can you do?
Yeah, I've seen some other people point this out, but I kind of like when Doctor Who looks just a little bit bad. Like it's part of the charm of the
Yes.
show.
I do too. My last statement sounded a little snarky coming out, and I didn't mean it, by the way, but I agree. I do love when Doctor Who is on a budget, because I think sometimes that's when it's at its best, because we literally got one of the best episodes out of that, which is Midnight in season 4
Yes, that's
with David
true.
Tennant, and that was filmed due to budget constraints. And it's a phenomenal episode and known as like a huge fan favorite. So I definitely appreciate when Doctor Who is on its budget. Not that it's easy for everyone involved in the production, but as the viewer, I love it. It brings more camp into it.
Me too. Before we're done talking about this episode, I feel like we need to mention I consider this the Ninth Doctor's Christmas special because the Ninth Doctor
Yes.
didn't get an official Christmas special, and every Doctor except sadly Jodie Whittaker, but she got New Year's special, so I guess it's okay. He didn't get a special, so I always consider this because it takes place on Christmas Eve. I consider this his unofficial Christmas special.
Yes. I same. And I do consider it the Christmas special.
Yeah. So for that, because of Rose's outfit and Charles Dickens and the great moments, I do like this episode, even though it's not
Same.
my favorite of the series.
But that appears to be the end of this episode. As always, thank you so much for listening to us talk about Doctor Who. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, rants, feel free to email us at timeywimeypod@gmail.com. It will also be in our show notes, and follow us on our Instagram, timeywimeypod, and our TikTok, timeywimeypod. And we will see you next time for the Aliens of London and World War III two-parter, which will be in one episode. Bye, guys.